Welcome to TennisCentric 2020. This is episode 2, and we're looking at non-sequential chunking in skill acquisition. So in tennis, we basically start with the ready position, and then we'll teach a setup. There's much that can be said about getting to the ball and the hitting zone, but the body's really going to create it. So really the focus will go to the follow-through, the moment right after the point of contact. And that's the essential chunk that we want to put together, because it will build a more robust timing mechanism. If the player learns it in sequence, they'll want to go, the cerebellum will assign a functional hierarchy to the sequence. So step 1 becomes the most important, step 2, 3. And so the timing can be messed up. Really, you want the point of contact to represent the functional hierarchy. So if you focus the player on the follow-through, you build a better timing mechanism, and it's less likely to break down, and it'll pull the other chunks together. So really at the level of skill acquisition, you're trying to create a picture of the stroke. So in the case of most players, will focus on the follow-through, and then you can go back and correct the other chunks later. But like I said, if you do the follow-through first, you get a more robust timing mechanism, and it suggests something about the way the brain works, and I think it would validate sort of this non-linear induction process. I mean, it is governed by a functional hierarchy, but it's not a computational schema that follows a linear progression. There's a feeling for what's happening as the stroke is induced, and you're trying to connect that feeling with a particular image that will correct the motor behaviors. As the behaviors become automated, you begin to focus on spacing and the nuances of the swing, the idea of closing the face. The wobble board there is so the player can become aware of the feel of the body. Proprioception can kind of disappear sometimes. And here we're seeing the use of the Sierpinski gasket to demonstrate body and brain dynamics. Really, when you're learning the stroke and you're putting the pieces together, the setup, the outer triangles there, the contact point, the follow through. What's happening is it's requiring tremendous glucose metabolism in the cortex of the brain, in these neural assemblies. And as the swing gets, as the redundancy occurs, one of those chunks will end up pulling the whole swing together, as I said, and so the picture of the stroke will become more refined. You'll be using less energy in the brain to basically pull the stroke together, and then as you keep repeating it, and the cerebellum gets involved, you're creating a form of redundancy in which the stroke gets automated. You get the phenomenon known as muscle memory, and basically this is a qualitative feel state that induces the stroke. And at this point, we can imagine the picture of the stroke moving into those smaller triangles, and so you're getting more perimeter for processing as it scales to the smaller fine scale. Less energy is required in the brain. So here's a 7-year-old who basically has automated the strokes, and now he's just working on spacing And you can see how the stroke becomes induced, and there's a real good rhythm that he's establishing as he loads and unloads his legs to fire the swing. And so really, what's probably going through his mind is he's queuing up this feel for the load, and it pulls the whole stroke together. And he's got a rough sense of the follow-through, so he knows that if he focuses on that follow-through, the whole stroke should come together. And this redundancy enables the cerebellum to error correct. And so really what he's trying to do here is maintain a presence of mind, but really let the body just fire. And you can see where the mental lapses occur. And this happens at all levels. And so here's a player who's working on her load, trying to get the weight in, and she's using the follow-through to pull the stroke together. She had a tendency to hang the weight back a little bit on her right foot, so she's unloading, and it's just pulling the stroke together. And she's working off of balls that are being fed to her. This is not a hitting exchange, so she can just concentrate on the technique. As we go to the hitting exchange, which the player here is trying to do, we want to see a really smooth integration of mind from focusing on the form to focusing on spacing and rhythm. And there'll be more variance here in terms of where the ball's landing, where he has to go. So the glucose metabolism, the brain at this point starts going towards positioning, spacing, rhythm. And really, you're just trying to automate the process, and you're observing, like I said, a presence of mind in terms of where the player's concentrating on the feel of that ball coming off the strings. But as soon as he starts to do it, you'll have a dissipation of control. The control, where his mind goes, is it's totally a function of what works for him. He might be focusing on rhythm. He might be thinking about what he had for lunch, the previous day. If it works to cue up the right swing at the right time, then you go with it, and it might be temporary. But really, the feel state is the key, and it tends to be kind of a gestalt process at this point. If you think too deliberately about any one thing, you're probably likely to throw it off. And so here's a player now integrating into the rally, and you can see that this camera angle gives you a sense of the spacing, and that's really what he's focused on, rhythm and spacing. And he's also working on his footwork in terms of recovery, because this becomes essential to integrating into play. And it's a cooperative hitting exchange. We're just hitting to each other at this point. And what you begin to understand here is the load, and the quality of the hit will be related to the improvement of timing, the physics, the use of leverage, and just power coming through the legs, ground reaction force coursing through the body. The stroke is being built from the ground up. Proprioception is an ascending corridor. And so, like I said, he's maintaining a presence of mind and observing the body just build this flow of forces up from the ground through the racket head and into the release. And the nonlinear aspect of this thing is really fascinating, because, as I said, if you start to think about it in clinical terms or in a linear fashion as a 1, 2, 3 process, you'll throw the timing off. So here's a 7-year-old integrating into play. And now he gets me on the run. And here you can see he starts thinking about winning the point, so that we see a slight breakdown of the stroke. I get one more back here. And as he thinks about the point, look at he's lost his loop, his form broke down. And that's an example of how mind can interfere with behavior. But really, all you need is a wall once you get the strokes down, and this is how you maintain the automation. You establish these behaviors. You just respond to the ball and hope that the stroke gets induced. Thank you for watching.